would you say that you were in denial to some degree?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I had one model of measurement, and that was, like a DUI or needing to go to rehab. And so it's so fascinating when we think about our cultural, perception of when someone has a drinking problem. And so I was in denial that I had a problem because I didn't look on paper the way that somebody who was an quote unquote alcoholic looks. And so we don't actually use the term alcoholic, really much anymore because it's not a medical term. We use alcohol use disorder. And so did I have some addiction to alcohol? Absolutely. Was I having trouble taking a break? Absolutely. And so the denial that I had was that I was needed help, or that it was bad enough to stop. And so one thing that was in my story was a few weeks before I stopped, I had been taking in my small town, we have a nonprofit like mental health services. And there's this group that takes lay counselors. And I thought, it'd be really cool to go and do some volunteer work and train as a lay counselor. And so there was 12 weeks of kind of learning more about their process. And that entire week was on addiction. And so there it was in black and white in my binder. And I listened to them and I thought, oh, that's me. And then I took home the binder and I read it again and I thought, yep. And then I thought, now what? Now what am I going to do? So talk about denial. Like now there was no more denying it, that this was an addictive behavior. It wasn't just a weakness. It wasn't a moral failing. And so that's where I really kind of thought, and it took me a couple more weeks to decide, I don't want to live an addicted life.
Mm. Do you have your own definition of what an addiction is?
Well, I think for me, I've never actually maybe been asked that, Lee, so fascinating. But I think for me, kind of what I was saying, it's not the amount that you're drinking, it's how it's affecting your life. And as I mentioned, it was definitely affecting my mental health of worrying about how much I was drinking, thinking about when I could drink again, thinking, did I have a problem with drinking? It was affecting my emotional health because I was using alcohol instead of having hard conversations, instead of pursuing the life that I wanted to live, instead of, allowing myself to dream bigger. I was just kept very small by just drinking on the couch every night and kind of drifting instead of living. And then it was definitely affecting my physical health because I wasn't able to get my health to the state that I wanted. Even though I was doing a lot of healthy things around diet and nutrition, I wasn't all the way there because alcohol was kind of this big impediment to me living that life. So for me, I think addiction is something where you're dependent, certainly. Mm. And then also just how is it affecting the quality of your life?
Mm. Yeah, so Paul Chek, who most of the audience will know who he is, he has, I think it's his own definition for addiction. And he says that an addiction is a repeated behavior that prevents you from getting your desired outcome.
Yeah, super powerful, right? And that is exactly what it is. And, the thing that people don't realize is that I mentioned before, the tolerance that alcohol builds up because our body is trying to protect us. So it says, okay, we got to get rid of this alcohol out of our system as quickly as possible. So now instead of one drink making you feel a little tipsy or euphoric, it's 2 drinks. I had a client once that said, I knew it was time to stop. I knew it was a problem for me when I went from 2-drink Kelly, they used to make fun of her, 2 drinks, Kelly gets all tipsy, to 3-drink Kelly. And she thought, oh, wait a minute. This means something.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, that's just reminded me, I'm going back a long time, but I used to have a client, lovely, lovely guy, but he used to come in and train with me first thing in the morning, and he would always smell of alcohol. You'd literally smell it coming through his skin. And we went to a boxing match in London. And so he drove there, and literally all night he was drinking. Just literally, I mean, I can't remember how many drinks he had, but it was a lot. And I said, you're not going to drive home, are you? He went, yeah, I'll be fine. And he looked completely sober, and he drove completely, he drove completely fine. I mean, he probably had 12 drinks.
Yeah.
And he was completely sober. He was completely sober.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, he just built up so much of an intolerance to alcohol that was just nothing to him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not sure it would have been too great if the police had pulled him over.
Yeah.
But
yeah, and that's, you bring up an interesting point, because when we think about people, will have these blackout behaviors. And what's so interesting about this blackout behavior is we think of blackout drunk as someone who is like flat on the floor, passed out. But no, the scary part about that blackout drunk, the way our body responds to protecting us from this toxin, is we function as if we are all there, and we'll have conversations with people, we'll do things, and then we don't remember. We'll drive, and it's pretty scary to think that we're having almost this out of body experience. But that is certainly, that happened for me toward the end of my drinking. I can remember an embarrassing moment where my daughter and son-in-law came up to our house. They were living on our property, and we had a full-on conversation. And the next day I thought, oh, I need to tell my son-in-law about this. And he and my daughter went, we talked about that. And they looked at me like, this is a problem. And I thought, oh crap, that's not good. And for many people, as drinking continues, we will have some of those experiences.